Yeah? Oh, great. All right, I think we're going to get started. Welcome, everybody, to the Open Government Hack Night. This is Hack Night number 104. And we're going to have a presentation from our friends at GitHub. Ben, and where's our friend? Oh, there he is. Hey, what's up? But before we get to that, we are going to go around the room and say hi. Oh yeah, I skipped the part about, do you know what this is, what this event is? Raise your hand if this is the first time you've been at this event. Show hands. Really? Only like 4, 5, 6? All right, well, welcome to Chicago's weekly place to talk about open government, open data, and civic technology. We've been meeting. This is the 104th time we've met together to talk about this stuff. Lots more to talk about. I'm sure there'll be like 1,000 of these at some point. Yeah, we talk about open data, and then we kind of, after the presentation, we kind of break up into groups and work on stuff or have conversations about open data or civic technology. Christopher leads a session called OpenGov 101 for those of you who are new to the concept. It's kind of like a 15-minute like boilerplate. Here's the things you need to know. I guess I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's do the whole round of the room, say hi thing next. So I'm Derek. I am with DataMade, and I make apps with open data. And we'll go with you next.
Carl Fogel with, Open Tech Strategies. We help organizations and governments launch and run open source projects.
I'm Ben. I lead the government team at GitHub, and I help the government get more involved with open source, open data, open government, all those kind of good things.
I'm Eric Benzen. I also work with DataMade and Derek.
My name's Randy, and I play with, right now with bus data and Python.
Rob Jessup, and I work at our national lab.
I'm Tina, and I am Kelsey. Sarah, I'm an American Vista, and I do memory things.
I'm Chris Williams. I was a web developer for a while. Now I'm working on a master's in journalism at Northwestern.
I'm Matt. I'm an undergrad at UChicago studying sociology and public policy.
My name is Renee. I'm always learning about developing. I translate one app at a time, slowly, and I want to learn how to make maps.
Hi, my name is Dan. I work at Ninja Real Estate. I am in charge of this underwriting model. So, okay.
I'm Chris. I work on the support team at GitHub.
Hi everyone, I'm Kathy Dang. I'm a math nerd, and I'm currently playing around with web development. Sorry, just hold on. Hi, I'm William. I'm currently with designation in digital design here in Chicago.
I'm Nicholas. I'm a project manager at Organizing Fractures.
My name is Matthew Thomas. I'm a teacher in political research.
Hi, I'm John Kent. I work at CME Group and interested in local politics and everything you guys can talk about.
I'm Christy Willard. I work in tax consulting and I'm interested in open source data.
I'm Nathan. I'm a web developer at GoHealth Insurance.
Cliff. I'm with Data Scout and I'm a data analyst.
David Ginsberg. I'm a software engineer and I'm interested in learning and getting involved in projects here.
My name is Ben Karodi, and I'm a web developer at OFA.
My name is Brent, and I do transportation modeling.
My name's Jason Wright. I'm a financial consultant and interested in big data.
I'm Linda Zavers with Honorary Chicago, doing maps and kind of biographies on the honorary commemorations of the city of Chicago.
I'm Nick Tolano. I'm a web developer at Organizing for Action.
My name is Marcos. I'm working on Alert, which is online marketing sales for the fire safety industry.
Bobby. I'm on the analytics team at Organizing for Action.
I'm Jordan Bouvier. I'm a web developer at Organizing for Action.
My name is Matt. I'm also at Organizing for Action.
I'm Claire Micklin. I'm a UX designer.
Steve Edgar, I'm database administrator at Latin School and work with the Institute of Postal Affairs.
Hi, I'm Elena Harkness. I work with the MacArthur Foundation on a bunch of civic technology projects.
My name is Tom Shank. I'm the Director of Analytics for the City of Chicago. Amongst other things, I run the Open Data Forum.
Warren Friel, computer engineering interested in public data.
Mark Baybaum, marketing researcher at Calvary.
I'm Diego. I'm interested in helping out in any way, data analysis, coding, testing.
Miguel, background in finance, investing, and neuroscience. Really interested in data viz. Mapping.
Morgan Bryant, I'm just here
to Kyle Schaefer, I built software at Gravy Agency.
Ninada, I'm a political science student.
Yeah, Sam Holland with Illinois Health Matters, and this week I'm teaching myself Leaflet.
Hey.
My name is Donald Smith. I work at GitHub. I'm spreading the world of open source to academia.
My name is Eve Tolbert. I'm co-founder at OpenGov, we do ed tech design for teacher leaders.
My name is Ada Diab. I'm a co-founder of Freedom Games and I design education games.
My name is Boyan. I'm with Forward US, working in the creation advocacy.
My name is Dan. I work at the Delta Institute, environmental nonprofit here in Chicago. I work on maps and models and data from Here to Learn.
My name is Daniel. I work in the National Public Housing Museum, and we're currently building a museum south of UIC on Taylor Street.
I'm Eric Rogers. I, among other things, am a freelance photographer at the moment. I'm just interested in all the cool projects.
My name is Dan. I work in municipal finance, and I'm just here because I'm curious about government data and like to learn about it.
I'm Venkat, and I work in web development.
My name is Craig. I work in web development.
Is that everybody? Did I say anyone? Oh, wait. Yeah.
And my name is Christopher Whitaker. I'm the Code for America Brigade Captain here in Chicago, as well as a consultant for the Smart Chicago Collaborative. And welcome to HackNet.
All right, awesome. So before we get to the presentation, we have sort of an open floor for announcements. Could be events, this could be projects you want to share, some sort of newsworthy thing. As long as it is open government, it's okay to say. And this also has recently included job openings. So, you know, you got that too, cool. Oh, is that a nice segue for you, Carl?
Thank you. Did you do that on purpose?
Maybe.
Collectionspace.org. Collectionspace is a bit of open source software for managing archives like libraries, museums, stuff like that. They have not one, not two, but 3 job openings. At least one of them, when I was hastily looking at the page today, is quite technical. It's like, you know a little bit about databases, a little bit about HTML and CSS and AJAX programming. It seemed like it described a lot of the people in this room, or people that you know. I know the people that run Collection Space, and they're really, I think, good to work for. So I encourage you to apply. And if you have questions about it, just come talk to me.
What's the name of the organization again?
Collectionspace.org.
If you're a coder, Atom, ATOM, the GitHub text editor, just left private beta today and is fully free and open source, aotim.io. Go grab it, hack on it. There's formal releases for OS X. You can also build it for Linux and Windows and help us test it. Second quick shout out is Jekyll. If you're a Jekyll user, Jekyll 2.0.0 should be coming out tonight. So we'd love to kick the tires and help build cool stuff with that. Some cool new features.
This website is built in Jekyll. Just saying.
Hi, I'm Eve again, and our organization is part of a citywide collaborative looking at mapping for citizen science. So it's the Hive Mapping Cooperative. And so if you're interested in participating with citizen science projects, use citizen science projects to help us figure out some mapping OpenGIS projects around. We're looking at helping out Friends of the Chicago River, which has 14 high schools collecting river water quality data. Forest Preserve District of Cook County in urban tree canopy mapping. We're going to make a bee map of the city, looking at where all the beehives are and how far they are from the community garden. So if anyone wants to do some BP science mapping, just come check in with me and we'll kind of coordinate it. Thanks.
Awesome. Other announcements? All right, I have a few. The first one is actually what you're looking at right now. The OpenGov HackNet website now, I rewrote, it used to be just plain HTML and CSS, and I decided to rewrite it in Jekyll over the weekend, which means now we have like stateful pages for all the events, which what really means to you is, here, I'll scroll down, which means we have a comment section under each event now, and this part of the event is actually sort of lends itself well to having being sort of using a comment section here. So if you maybe before you come to an event, or if you can't make it to a future event, you want to post your announcements on this page. We're going to be linking to it in the email. So you guys all get the email that we send out every Monday. Does anybody not know what I'm talking about? There's a list you can sign up for on the OpenGovHackNight.org website to get basically an update every time, every Monday for what the next HackNet event is going to be. And now there's also an RSS feed for all the events as well if you like getting your data that way. So this is new. I also added a Flickr thing that basically if you tag a photo in Flickr with the word Chai Hack Night and then the number. Remember how I said we're on the 104th Hack Night? If you tag a photo from tonight that you maybe take, put it on Flickr and tag it with Chai Hack Night -104, it will eventually show up on here. For some reason there's like a weird bug with it. But anyways, it'll work. It'll be awesome. So Christopher's already taken a bunch of photos, and I went through and he noticed that I scoured all of his photos and tagged everything. Hey, collaboration. So that's just some new features to this website. Another announcement is, how many of you guys were here when we talked about largelots.org? That was maybe 4 times ago. So this is a site that I worked on with List Chicago, Eric worked on it as well. And it's basically a website to help citizens on the south side apply for these lots that the city of Chicago is selling for $1. So it was a pilot program where the city actually owns something on the order of 15,000 vacant lots throughout the entire city, and they want to sell it back to the public for a lot of reasons, but mostly to reinvigorate some of these areas of the city. So this is an application that we launched, and we built it in like 10 days, and it was deemed a success, so much so that they're deciding to expand the program to East Garfield Park. And so that was announced just this morning that this summer, this particular large lots program is going to like live on, and it's like, yay, technology, yay, policy, coming together. So yay, right? That's exciting. And I suppose my last announcement would be thank you to GitHub for providing the food and the beer, which is a rare treat. And I suppose with that, I'll leave it to you guys. And we're going to hear some good things from Ben Balter on GitHub and government.
Yeah, that's some good stuff. How's everyone doing? I'm Ben. So I work at GitHub. Does everyone know what GitHub is? Let's back up for a second. Who here is a coder? Raise your hand. You actually write software. Who here has ever written a line of code in their life? Let's look and expand that a little bit. Okay, sweet. And raise your hand up if you're here. If you heard of GitHub before today, you know what GitHub is. You used it before. Sweet. So for the uninitiated, GitHub is a social network for software developers. Think of it somewhat similar to Facebook for code. So instead of sharing pictures of your kids or what you had for lunch, you share what software source code you're working on. And just like on Facebook, people can come along and be like, your kid's really cute, your kid's really ugly, whatever they, say. On the same exact thing on GitHub. People can come along and be like, that's a really elegant solution, or like, hey, I ran into that same problem. You can do that this way. So taking the social experience and bringing it to coding. So at GitHub, my job is to get the government, like I said, more involved with open source and open government and the kind of things that we care about. I'm a big open source geek and a big open government geek. I spent my entire professional career, I was about 5 or 6 different federal agencies. Landing my last gig was at the Presidential Innovation Fellows, which if you're familiar with Code for America, it's kind of like Code for America run through the White House. But so I'm hoping today just to geek out a little bit, talk about kind of what's happening with open government, where I think open government's going, where you should look, pull up some examples of some cool things that are going on in the open government world. And then when we break it out, it sounds like I was hoping to talk about 10 or 15 minutes, so I'll actually slow down as well. Keep it to about 10 or 15 minutes, maybe a couple questions and answers. But then afterwards, Arvin and I, my coworker, and Chris, we're going to do a little genius bar. So if you have any questions about Git and GitHub, just find us in our black hoodies. And then Derek's going to do a more in-depth kind of Git and GitHub 101 if you're interested, if you've never touched GitHub before and want to. So stump the genius, and I want to be a genius by the end of the night. So sound good? Sound like a good roadmap, good plan? I'm into it. All right, sweet. What we got going on here? All right, so when I was in federal government, this was basically something I saw every day and know was common sense, right? This is how the government works, be it the federal level, the state level, the local level. It's using email as version control. So in open source software, we have this idea called version control, which tracks who made what change when. This is how the government does it, right? So you have an email going around that goes out to a distribution list, the entire team. You'll probably have a Word document, and this is my favorite part of it. Revised, final, final, revised, final, Ben's edits, and then some random string that at one point was a number, and then you tap like Ben's edits again to the end of that, just to mess with you, right? And this is how the government collaborates, right? So everything happens kind of in this bespoke process. Every time the government wants to collaborate, they're reinventing the wheel again and again. By the way, I've been using this slide for a good 3 months now. It wasn't until last week somebody pointed out there's no paper in the typewriter. This is how backwards government is. They don't even know how to use a typewriter. Oh, really? Oh, yeah, there's an umlaut there. Oh, this is now my new favorite slide. That is awesome. Eagle eyes there. But so every time the government wants to collaborate, they're making up the process again and again, right? So the traditional workflow would be, maybe I'm some sort of policy analyst, a legislative assistant. I'll go to my desk. I'll fire up Microsoft Word or my favorite desktop publishing software. I'll start writing out my memo, my press release, my brief, my legislation. And when I get it to a good point, I say, this is no longer mine. I want feedback on this. I send that out to the team for feedback. You all send that back to me. I have no way of knowing as someone else in the office, did you miss my comment? Did you ignore my comment? Do you think my comment was stupid? Did it get lost in the email shuffle? Because all I know is I see you sending out the email, and then you get a bunch of emails back. The other problem with that is a bunch of people kind of maybe send the same comments over and over again. So it's this bespoke process. It's very much hub and spoke. And that's how, whether it's software development, sadly, whether it's policy, whatever they're working on, this is the predominant flow. So what that leaves us is the quintessential smoke-filled back room, right? If I don't know that you're working on the policy document, I'm not part of that conversation. If I don't get that email, I have no input into that process. Again, whether it's a press release, memo, maybe it's open data that you're publishing, whatever that thing you're collaborating on, if I'm not on that email list, if I'm not physically in the office, let alone if I'm outside of government, if I'm not on the other side of the firewall, we still have that quintessential smoke-filled back room. In DC, at least, smoking is banned indoors, but they still have the wood paneling and the books and the leather chairs. The funniest thing is Project Open Data, which I'll get to in a second, which is the White House open data policy. At least when the project started, they'd have a weekly meeting in a room that sadly looked very much like this in the White House, and they'd go through every pull request and be like, okay, agenda item number 7 is pull request 46. Can we merge that? So this literally does still happen to this day. Not making this up. So talk a little bit about how we got here and where I think we're going, at least in terms. I'm going to talk about federal government because that's what I know, but I'll try to translate it as much as possible to state and local government, and maybe I can have some help from the audience, a little bit audience participation as well. So from the beginning of time, right? So we had George Washington cross the Delaware River. Are you with me so far? Okay, sweet. By the way, beginning of time, when America was founded, right? If I needed something, I would make a request to the federal government. Hey, Georgie, I heard you wrote this new thing, const to something. Can I get a copy of that? Right? That might have been the first open data request, the open government request, as far as we know. And George will say, I don't know, Jeff wrote that. Go ask Jeff. And Jeff will take his quill and figure out a way to get me a copy. And it's this very bespoke process. It's very responsive. And every time a request comes in, George and Jeff have to kind of, George Washington and Thomas Jefferson. Tom, not Jeff. You're supposed to help me out here. Sorry. I just make it up and say it with such conviction, And so the process was reinvented each time. And then I skipped a step. Something happened in 1966. That would have been the FOIA, the Freedom of Information Act request. Right, so we kind of standardized it a little bit on the federal level with the Freedom of Information Act request, which says you now have the right to ask for stuff, which before that was a question to begin with. And that's broken down on the state and local level to sunshine laws. Did I say that right? Sunshine? Yeah, okay. Sunshine laws and similar. And that happened in the 60s and the 70s where people said, you know what, it's okay to ask the government for stuff. Crazy idea. And then in 1996, and then in the 2000s, the Obama administration, the Clinton administration said, hey guys, there's this internet thing. Not only should we have the ability to ask questions, but we should also figure out a way to standardize what happens inside the firewall, inside government. So now I have a need. I request that of the government. The government makes a response. That's what we had before, right? That was what we had with FOIA requests. Then all of a sudden they're like, wait a minute, every day we get another stupid request for a copy of the Constitution. Rather than having poor Thomas like rewrite with his quill and like he's got carpal tunnel syndrome, they didn't know what that was back then. Rather than having to reinvent the wheel each time for how we deal with that response and then they use it, why don't we just kind of anticipate that and start putting data outside, right? Let's just proactively start publishing data. They called it open government. They called it open data. But the problem came in, and the bottleneck then just shifted from over here to the response section where they didn't know what to do, down to the question section where they didn't know what to do, right? So I get that copy of the Constitution, and it says Second Amendment, something about guns, like there's a smudge there that's really important. So I have to go back and ask, like, Tom or Jeff, what did we say his name was? I think Tom. I have to go back and ask Tom, like, dude, you wrote this, but I know this is like the 60th copy, it was really late in the night. Right, there's that dialogue there that happens, what's the name of this column, right? Is this month, day, year, month, day? Is this a typo? Is this actually supposed to be that way? Getting the data isn't enough. There needs to be a dialogue there for the citizen to ask questions, to clarify what that thing that they just got, and then for the government to answer. And so right now we have this bottleneck right here where this is primarily being transacted through email, right? So maybe I submit a FOIA request, I get the answer back, and it has some column that's just called like blue, right, or tree. And I have no idea what that means. Internally, it probably is very significant. It maps to some other database system. But I, as an open source developer, I, as a civic hacker, I have to email, opendata@agency.gov or agency.state.gov to try to figure out what's going on. So we just shifted the bottleneck down the line. Typical government, good work, right? So publish, consume, use, and then we got the bottleneck here. That's where we are today. So you think about it, we kind of went from closed government, right? I had to ask for the stuff. I now have a right to ask that stuff. We theoretically now have open government, where the government proactively publishes things out. So my thesis for today, what I'm trying to get across, is open government is great and all. I'm letting you finish. But open government isn't the end-all, be-all. We should be looking towards collaborative government, where we solve that bottleneck at the end. So it's not just seeing how the sausage is made, but actually having the opportunity to participate in the sausage making. Because by the time we see how the sausage is made, it's too late. The sausage is already bad, right? We want to get in earlier on and make the process better. I've always thought that government is the largest and longest running open source project in the world, right? Think about it, you got a bunch of people get together, try to solve a problem, a shared problem that's bigger than us all. No one can finish it alone. It's got lots of bugs for sure, different modules and dependency. It's definitely got trolls. Big open source project. So quick, a little parable just to kind of drive the example home. So let's say you are a lawyer, and I say, hey, I need a confidentiality agreement. Will you please draft me up a confidentiality agreement? You draft me up this awesome confidentiality agreement and give it to me. And I'm like, that is awesome. One small problem. So I asked you for a very important legal document, but what you actually gave me was an impotent legal document, right? So after the fourth letter, R, so the difference between important, I'm trying here, I'm really trying. For those of you back who can't see, I first spelled it impotent, which is not a good word, and then I wanted it to be important, so so I need to get that information back to you, that after the fourth letter of this agreement that you just sent to me, I needed to add an R. There's a typo in that. So kind of in the olden day, going back to our analogy, I would then email back to you. I think I have another slide about that. Yeah, okay, so I would then email that back to you, but if I sent that document out to everyone in this room, I would have just gotten 50 or 60 emails that says, Ben, you're an idiot. After the fourth letter, insert an R. And that's not very efficient, because nobody else in the room has the ability to know that Derek or Carl already found that 20 minutes ago, and it's already been corrected. So maybe we move to something like Dropbox. Maybe you fax it to me. There's different models of collaboration. Maybe you call me up. God forbid, maybe you like walk over to my desk and interrupt what I'm doing to let me know. But it's very much a hub and spoke model where you're reconveying that information to me. You don't have the ability to see what other people are doing. So this is kind of where open source got its roots, and Carl's going to really, really correct me if I get anything wrong, or he'll just tweet about it. No. Open source started out in a very similar way, right? So the publisher would publish out a piece of software. Firefox, Mozilla, whatever it might be. I, as a user, I need a web browser. I consume that software. I find a bug with that, and I go ahead and I modify that software. I create something that's called a patch, and in our analogy, this would be insert an R after the fourth letter. It could be change the menu to blue, whatever it might be. I send that patch back to the publisher, back to Mozilla, to add it to the software, and then Mozilla republishes out the next version of Firefox. That's how it worked on paper, right? Seems like a very elegant model. I get it, I change it, I submit it, great, good. But that's not how it worked in practice, right? In practice, we had that same bottleneck that involved email. because I noticed that bug. I'd say, hey Ben, was this really supposed to be an impotent legal document, or is this supposed to be an important legal document? So before I even modify it, I'm emailing the publisher, the author directly. It's that same emailing opendata@agency.gov problem. I eventually find out that it is in fact a bug. I find out how I need to submit that change to the software. I finally write that patch, I finally contribute it, and it finally gets out. We have this big bottleneck here where we're still using email as the primary mechanism to transact the information about what could change, what needs to be changed. So this is one of my favorite slides. This is the README for how to contribute to the Linux operating system. And just to prove, this is actually text, right? This is not an image. This is size like 1.5 font, maybe size half font. This is extremely complicated, right? Like, I'm an open source developer, I've been in open source my entire life, and I would not even probably read past like, hello, welcome to Linux, right, to figure out how to contribute. I'll say, look, it's not worth my time to figure all this stuff out. The bug's not that important to me. It's one character. I can live with the time mistakes. So the idea here is that at some point between Linux, which was let's call it the 70s, before I was born, let's just leave it at that, really long time ago. But sometime between Linux and today, technology hit this tipping point where it's actually become easier to work together than alone. We no longer have the typewriter. Well, some government agencies. Most government agencies don't have the typewriter. We have computers, we have the internet, we can kind of smash together our collaboration platform and our publication platform, our drafting platform. And it's actually harder to do things in private, right? To actually email things out. You got that long chain of Ben's edits and the random string to eventually get it published and converted from wherever it is. And so open source changed as well. I won't get into too much detail here, but just know that open source has certain constraints, right? It's rarely two people working on the same thing at the same time, rarely two people working at the same place at the same time. And so as a result, certain constraints, things are electronic, right? We're not having those meet space meetings anymore as opposed to cyberspace, right? So meet space, people being in a room, wood paneling. You don't require people to be in the same place at the same time. They're asynchronous, so I can be on the other side of the world, I can be in a different country. Everything's made available, right? The kind of the lingua franca of open source is the URL. Everything in open source always has a URL. Every decision, every discussion, every release, and everything's lock free. I don't need to ask Mozilla for their permission to change something. I can just go and do it, and maybe I submit it back, maybe I don't. So just keep those constraints in mind, and think about how can we take these constraints and apply them to government and apply them to open government efforts. So this is what open source looks like today. So an author publishes code out. A collaborator just goes ahead and modifies it, right? Because they all that information, like I said, it's online, it has URLs, it's no longer everyone sending me a bunch of change requests. I can go and see Carl's already posted that after the 4th character, add an R, and then everyone else can see that that change is being processed, maybe point along and be like, yep, I agree, that was the wrong word, this is the proper word. So the community then discusses that. The community reaches a general consensus that proposed change is actually, in fact, a good change. Author just says, yep, that makes sense. That's not putting any sort of like bad code or swear words in there, and merges it back in. The big distinction here is that it's decentralized, that everyone has a complete copy of everything that we're working on, be it a text document, be it software, be it data. So this is how you contribute to petitions.whitehouse.gov, the White House We the People petitions platform. If you want to go and get Justin Bieber deported, this is the software that powers that and makes that possible. And this is the entire contributing file, right? Compare and contrast that to that giant size 1 font, black background, green text we had for Linux. It's all standardized, right? All you have to do now if you want to contribute to Project Open Data is click the edit button, make your proposed change, and hit propose. It's that simple. So you no longer, there are people that have contributed to petitions.whitehouse.gov, or I mentioned Project Open Data, the White House Open Data Policy, that aren't software developers, that don't have computer science degrees, because we're lowering the barrier to entry and making it easier for people to contribute. When you do that, all of a sudden you have the 18-year-old that just graduated her high school civics class. They still have to take the Constitution test in Illinois, right? I was born and raised in Chicago, so yeah, Constitution. Right? The 18-year-old that just passed her Constitution test and the stereotypical lobbyist with a briefcase full of money are all on the same page, right? I'd really love it if that lobbyist for Coke or Pepsi or whatever corporation comes in and it's like, I really think you should add an R after the 4th character of that legal document, and the senator or the state senator comes along and says, that's a great suggestion. It's on GitHub. Pull request welcome. Right? We can actually get there if we make the tools easy enough. So in open source, we move from closed source to centralized open source, which is kind of where we are today with open government, where you can publish things out, but I still have to like communicate with you. It's still that hub and spoke model. To more decentralized open source, where everyone can kind of do their own thing, and we have checks to make sure that it all works out together. So without getting too technical, just some screenshots just to make things tangible and a little bit more concrete. So this is the White House petitions platform. This is the code behind We the People. You can see here is different files, some folders. We have over here there are 23 issues. There are 3 pull requests. I'll get into what those are in a second. But most importantly, it has a URL. Anyone in the world can go to github.com/whitehouse/petitions and see the exact current state of the White House petitions platform as it is right now. Whether I work at the White House, whether I'm just a citizen of the United States, whether I'm a citizen of China. Right? I can go here and see up to the minute exactly how this is. There's no longer that typewriter where I write it, this is my document, and then I send it out for feedback, and it's a black box. This is all happening out in the open. Everything has a URL. Everyone can contribute. So like I said, the community discusses. So did I skip a slide there? Okay, we'll make that slide up. Okay, so there was a pull request that was submitted here, a proposed change that a member of the community submitted. And this is the community then discussing it, right? They're saying, hey, it was a technical change, it was a patch. They said, hey, I really think that patch should be submitted upstream to this other project. People discuss it, and it wasn't until there's all this whole big discussion here, until the exact end that Lee Heyman, the new media director of the White House, comes along, says, that's a really great change. Thank you very much for submitting that. Let me go ahead and approve that. So unlike Wikipedia, where anyone can make a change, the only person that can make a change to an open source project, to the canonical version, the one that's actually live and on the website, is the project maintainer. Community discusses. Oh, this is out of order. That's sad. I'm sorry about that. So this is the top of the pull request. So this would be P. Borelli, fixed a few typos. You can see here he's like removed an array key, and so you can see that kind of description of the test of the change. And again, this has a URL. Anyone in the world can go to White House Petitions Poll 3 and see the exact discussion, participate in that discussion, and 6 months from now, that'll still exist. Author reviews. This is what the White House would see. So you can see here, the White House misspelled the word figure. Maybe that's a British spelling or something. That would be like Fox News for me. Briefly change the spelling. Receive, I before E, except after E. So the author can review that change. And this is all they have to do. They don't have to police things. They don't have to, it's just looking to see what's changed, looking to see the agreement, the consensus, the community, the rough consensus the community found, and then merging it through. So this is how I think open government is going to change, and I think where everyone in this room can kind of come into play. It's no longer the government is over there and I'm over here and there's no means to communicate. We can take that same open source model, that idea of the government publishes stuff out, citizens modify it, community discusses it, government merges it back in, and have this kind of nice cycle. I think the next slide will explain a little bit, remember? Yeah, so I think this is going to start with open source, right? The really, really geeky stuff, right? So geeks with neckbeards and Mountain Dew and Doritos crumbs, right? That's where this is going to start, and that's where we're already seeing this in the basement of government agencies. But these kind of ideas and these concepts aren't limited just to software, right? Text is text, code is code, version control is version control, tracking who made what change when. There's no reason we can't apply that to open data, right? The city of Chicago released a lot of their GIS data. I heard a bunch of people talking about maps. I'll get to that in 1 second. Released a lot of their GIS data on GitHub, and so any member of Chicago, any member of any of the internet can go and say, hey, like there's a mistake here, here's how you should change that. So like a citizen came along when the Damon L Street station was built and was like, hey, by the way, like you have this building footprint stuff, but it's wrong. Like I live across the street and like I can see that's wrong. Here's what it should be. You should go ahead and change that. So open sourcing data, having kind of a pedigree of that data, having the ability to citizens provide feedback on the data, normalizing columns, adding documentation, wherever that might be. And eventually kind of the holy grail would be open government. So we have legislation online, we have policy memos online, we have the kind of nuts and bolts and actually open sourcing government at its core. So just some quick cool examples just to breeze through these. The last slide of this is a link to this presentation. This entire thing is a website. It's actually on GitHub. And so all these are links. If you want to, you don't have to like type down quickly. Just grab the URL at the end. You can click through all this. So this is Project Open Data, the White House Open Data Policy, which I mentioned a couple times. This is a living, breathing, live human, not human, sadly. We tried to do that, but we just couldn't get it sentient. Skynet, budget constraints, the sequester. No, so this is a living, breathing document where any member of the public, any member of the government is encouraged to come along and say, hey, White House, you're great with policy and all that, but actually, when we talk about schemas, you should use JSON, not XML. Anyone in the world just clicks the button at the top that says help improve this content. gets a big edit stream, makes a proposed change, and hits submit. And the White House goes in their like white, their mahogany room and discusses that proposed change. The other thing that's really different here about this is this view revision history button, right? When's the last time you pulled up a White House policy memo or a bill or legislation and could see who made what change when, the discussion around each of those changes, why those changes are made, and exactly what was changed. So we have a full pedigree history for the beginning of this document and hopefully to the end of time. So that's Project Open Data, the White House Open Data Policies. This is another one to give a cool shout out to. The Canadian, can I say Canada here? So sure. We're a little bit closer, but no. The Canadian Web Experience Toolkit, those guys are little maple leaves and Canadian bacon and stuff. Born in the USA. The Web Experience Toolkit is one of the largest open source projects on GitHub among government agencies. So the Canadian government basically made Twitter Bootstrap for Government that has focused on 508 and accessibility, or they've used WCAG or whatever it is. But accessibility, and it has to be multilingual, and it has to be usable and all sorts of fun stuff like that. So not every, but most government websites use this same template, and then they all contribute back to the same template. So every time, they have different themes, but every time there's a bug, they fix it once as a government rather than reinventing the wheel each time. City of Philadelphia, they're doing some really cool stuff. I know we had some people talking about maps. They're doing some real cool stuff with geodata. So for example, they wanted to publish where to get a flu shot this past November or so. And so the typical play to do that would be to spin up some proprietary software and just put out a map, maybe even just a screenshot of a map. And they're like, nah, that's probably not the best way to do it. It is on the internet after all. People will see this. And so what they did is they put it out in an open format. They put it out in GeoJSON. And if you commit GeoJSON to GitHub, it automatically maps it. And I don't know if this is interactive or not. We'll find out. Yeah, so there you go. So this is a farmer's market, actually. This is my farmer's market example. But you can go through and see all oh, no, it is. No, this is flu shots, right? So you can go through and see it says bring proof of identity. This data's all there. But they didn't stop there. They said, look, they have the flu here in Chicago, right? I haven't been here in a while. They still got the flu here? Yeah. It's cold or hot. And so they said, wait a minute, like Philadelphia is not the only city in the world to get the flu, and Philadelphians aren't the only citizens in the world to get flu shots, right? So they actually made an open format to say, like, hey guys, we know this is the best format, but we're putting this schema out there as how we think we should be documenting flu shots. Other cities, please come along and tell us how to document those flu shots better, and let's make an open format for flu shots. And so they did, and then Chicago came along and San Francisco came along and collaborated on that format and also published their flu shot data in the same specification. So if I'm an open source developer, or I am, but if I had time, I can make an app that's like where to find a flu shot, and right off the bat, if I build it to that spec, it automatically works in 3 large cities. So that's really cool, thinking about not just open sourcing the code, but going a little step further down the stack, getting away from the geeky stuff and starting to open source the stuff around that. I'm talking a lot about things the government can do, but there's no reason that civic hackers can do that on the outside and then just walk over to City Hall and be like, here's a flu shot spec, you should do that. Or get the data in a different format and be like, here's the better way to do that, and lead by example. San Francisco did the same thing with their laws. So this is SFMoki. That's an awesome name. GitHub.com/SFMoki. They published all their laws. They used American Legal Publishing, which puts it out in a strange format that you can permalink to. They converted everything over to, I believe, Markdown, pushed it online. And my favorite part about this is you see there's like these download files here and view on GitHub. Their legal department made them put a giant modal pop-up that takes up the entire screen. So if you click one of these, it says like, by the way, if you download this and change it, that is not legally binding. You can't like make jaywalking legal. It still has to go through the state legislature, the city legislature before it becomes law. Which I think that is really a great testament to the vision of the open source community and the open government community, because the assumption is, yes, I can download and change it, and it's just as valid as yours, and I can always submit that back. They're like, nah, you kind of have to get voted on, and people with wigs, they still wear wigs and stuff, I don't know, white wigs, and that's just how I assume they wear. I think this is the last one of this that I'll shut up for a little bit, is what cities and states are doing that you can take back to wherever you are feedback repos. So this is USAID, the United States Aid. I don't know what USAID stands for.
Agency for International Development.
Let's go with that. That sounds good. Agency for International Development. And so they wanted a way to engage with software developers. I told you GitHub is a social network for software developers. So they just created a repo, a project on GitHub. Didn't put any code in here other than this README that says, hey, give me feedback for us. And people open up issues, and this is where they have their discussion at. So instead of emailing newmedia@usaid.gov, I can go to github.com/USAID, and I can see other problems other people have had. So if you already asked me how to normalize data or what that column is, you don't have to then ask that of the agency again and again. You just go search the archives, can have a cross discussion. The idea here is you're getting rid of this hub and spoke model where it's me talking to the agency, but empowering people. So maybe Carl really knows about international aid, and maybe I really know about Python. It's creating that connection. I don't know Python at all. It's creating that connection that we can get together and like help each other out and build something really cool, not having the agency or the government as a single point of failure. Oh, this is my favorite. I should have opened this one up earlier. Let that open up so I can see the background. Are these examples fun? Do you want me to, are these good? I'll go through a couple really quickly. So this is gov.uk's launch. So gov.uk, they took their entire website, federated website infrastructure, and centralized it into a single gov.uk website. What I love about this is the way it launched is somebody submitted a pull request. If we actually look at the pull request, all it is just dropping the word beta from different stuff. Like, so here they're dropping the word beta from the logo and like taking out the beta nodes. Super simple stuff. Submits a pull request. Again, this is all happening in the open. And then the internet becomes the internet and does what the internet does best. Right, so people are like, congrats, exciting, yay, brilliant, thumbs up, some emoji gets snuck in there, and then things get crazy fast. We got some, thumbs up. We got an appearance of the Old Spice guy. And this is a government project, and this is celebrated, this is accepted, this is taking internet culture and injecting it into government. We have some cats, because, it's the internet. And it's, just, and I think this is an opportunity for us in the room, right? It's when you submit a pull request, the government agency shouldn't respond, dear sir or madam, I'm going to receive your pull request dated 27 February. I believe it is a good, no, you say thumbs up, merge, emoji, right? So kind of injecting some of that internet culture into government and just explaining to them how 20, 30, 40 somethings work. You don't have to work like you're 200 years old. Yeah, and that's actually them responding. This is Chicago. This is Illinois' 4th congressional district, as it was gerrymandered between the 111th and 113th Congress. So I went through, so this is an example of GeoJSON diffing on GitHub. So I said if you commit any GeoJSON file to GitHub, it'll automatically map it. We'll also diff it. So a diff is just the difference between two different versions of the same file in time. And so I went through, and on the first Monday of every year, I committed to GitHub, not like all the way back through time. I had a script to do it. Don't worry, I have a life. But it went all the way back for 10 Congresses, or no, 13 Congresses. Let's go with 11. 11 Congresses. And you pick version in time, so I can go through and I want to compare any congressional district in the country. I want to compare where it looked like in 2004. Let's call it an election year. Yeah, 2004 to how it looks like today. And so you can see kind of what's added is red. What's added is green. What's removed is red. Taking a concept from open source, where this you saw before that diff of adding receive and the kind of the red-green. What was it important? Doing that same thing with data. And this is all online. It's again, slides are here, but it's github.com/benbalter/congressional districts. Every district's in there if you want to play around with that. This is kind of cool. So github.com/United States. A bunch of just really cool civic hackers, handful out of Sunlight, Josh Data out of Civic US, and all sorts of cool stuff. They went through and they said, look, there's no open source or open data method for finding like who the presidents were, what their names were when they were born. There's no machine-readable open data source. So they just crowdsourced that. They just went through and threw a bunch of data in there, and now people can take that and version that into their projects and build cool stuff. So you don't need the government's permission to do this. They didn't like go to actually, the United States and like knock on the door and be like, can we take public information and categorize it? They just went ahead and did it. And this is executive branch. They have every congressional committee going back through time and just kind of crowdsourcing. Say, hey, you probably need this for your app. Instead of us all doing this individually, let's just solve it once and solve it for all of us. Data.gov, great example, just launched, call it 6 weeks ago. Sounds about good. This is the first government project I know of that did everything in the open from the start. And when it launched, it's going to be right here. When it launched, they had like 176 open tickets. So that was the government first time saying to the world, like, we're not perfect. We know there are 175 things wrong with it. Come help us make it better. I think that's kind of an example of where we're going. Last two, 18F. So if you don't know about 18F, you should be following them. They're kind of the government startup. They're within GSA. They have like founders and like agents, and they're trying to be a startup for the government. They went to IKEA. They have green carpeting. I've seen it. And the idea here is they're just doing things in the open. So this is a playbook, best practices for building APIs, and they're just doing that in the open, just right on GitHub with collaborative documentation. So if you know how to build an API, you can go there and say, like, no, this is actually the better way to make the API. They launched about 2 or 3 weeks ago. The 18F did. They already have, I think, there's like, about 25 repositories there. So they're doing some really cool stuff. Oh, that's the original time. So that was the last one. So let me just go back to the last two pitches. Are if you are a government employee, we launched a government-only community, semi-private community for government employees. GitHub.com/government, collaborative best practices documentation. Any questions you have, send your friends that way. But more importantly, I think the one that's more applicable here is if you go to government.github.com, there's two pitches there. One, go read it. There's some really, really cool stories, including the city of Chicago, as you can see right there, about doing some cool stuff with open data, with open source, and just kind of some inspiring talks to give yourself some ideas, short 2-3 paragraph, I have a short attention span. But also, if you know of cool stories, if you build cool stuff on government data, using open source, using open data, we would love to help tell those stories. So going from government agency to government agency, from state to state, the common theme is that these rooms happen everywhere. Right, there are it's Tuesday, right? There are 3 other Tuesday night hack nights happening someplace in the world, I guarantee you. But none of them know that they're all happening, and they don't connect, and they don't exchange ideas. So that when people go to their government agency and say, like, hey, we should do this open source thing, you're looked at like a hippie with a tie-dye laptop. They think it's crazy. They've never heard of it before. So I love your help getting your story out there to show that this isn't a fad. This isn't something that just like people, eat pizza and drink beer, although that pizza is delicious. I flew in just for pizza, I flew in. I didn't know I was going to be speaking. No, not just that these kind of things, but it's actually something real and some really, really cool stuff is happening. So like I said, these slides are online. If you go to ben.balder.com, make government better together, you can grab these slides. They're also on GitHub. And if you have any questions, if there's ever way that I can be helpful, feel free to email government@github.com anytime. My job is to make your job as easy as possible and just kind of empower these kind of hacky weekend projects that you're doing. So like I said, immediately after this, I think we can maybe keep a couple seconds for question and answer, but we turn it over to Derek to do a more in-depth GitHub 101, black background, green text, committing, merging, forking, not a bad word. And then we'll be out in the half A, is that what that's called?
Main area.
Main area, technical term. We'll be out in the main area doing a little bit of a kind of genius bar, geek out, try to stump us. Any question you have, large or small, we'd love to just talk about it. So thank you very much. Other than why am I wearing a hoodie in this very hot room? No questions? Sweet. Well, I look forward to seeing you out in the main room.
All right, awesome. So before we